Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to go deep into one of the most important and rapidly growing fields in the modern world of law enforcement and digital security, and that is the investigation of cybercrime cases. Now, whether you are a student studying cybersecurity or digital forensics, a law enforcement officer who wants to understand digital evidence, an IT professional trying to protect your organization, or simply someone who is curious about how investigators track down criminals on the internet, this video is made for you. I am going to take you through the entire process, step by step, slowly and clearly, with real-world examples at every stage so that nothing feels abstract or confusing. So please watch this until the very end, because every part of this process connects to the next, and if you skip any section, you might miss a critical piece of the puzzle. Let's begin. Before we can investigate a cybercrime, we need to understand exactly what cybercrime is, because it is not one single thing. It is an entire category of criminal activity that takes place using computers, networks, and the internet as either the tool, the target, or both. For example, when a hacker breaks into a company's server and steals customer credit card information, the computer network is both the tool and the target. But when a criminal uses a smartphone to send fraudulent text messages to victims and trick them into sending money, the device is simply the tool, and the real crime is fraud. This distinction matters a great deal during an investigation because it shapes what kind of evidence you're going to look for and where you're going to find it. Cybercrime broadly falls into several major categories: hacking and unauthorized access, where someone enters a system without permission; phishing and social engineering, where criminals deceive victims into giving up sensitive information; ransomware attacks, where malicious software locks a victim's files and demands payment to restore access; identity theft, where a criminal steals someone's personal information to impersonate them; cyberstalking and online harassment; child exploitation offenses committed over the internet; and financial fraud conducted through digital channels. A classic real-world example is the 2017 WannaCry ransomware attack, which spread to over 200,000 computers in 150 countries, locking files in hospitals, banks, and government agencies, and demanding Bitcoin payments. Investigators around the world had to work together, analyze malware code, trace digital transactions, and coordinate with international agencies to attribute that attack. This shows you just how complex a cybercrime investigation can become. So the very first thing any investigator must do is clearly define and classify the crime. What exactly happened? How did it happen? Who was targeted? And what type of criminal activity are we dealing with? Now, every cybercrime investigation begins with a complaint, either from a victim, an organization, or sometimes from automated threat detection systems that flag suspicious activity. The moment a complaint is received, the investigator's job is to document everything precisely and completely. This means recording the date and time the complaint was filed, the full identity of the complainant, a detailed description of what happened, and any initial evidence the victim can provide, such as screenshots, email headers, transaction records, or log files. Think about this example. A small business owner comes to you and reports that their company's bank account was drained overnight. They noticed unauthorized wire transfers totaling $50,000 to accounts they do not recognize. Your first step is to sit with that business owner and document every detail. When did they last log in to their banking portal? Do they remember any suspicious emails they may have clicked on recently? Has any employee had unusual access to the banking credentials? And has their computer shown any strange behavior, like slowdowns or unexpected pop-ups? All of this information forms what we call the preliminary complaint record, and it is the foundation of your entire case. Never underestimate anything the victim tells you at this stage, because even a detail that seems irrelevant, like "my computer was running slow last Tuesday," might later connect to a piece of malware that was installed on that exact day. This next step is absolutely critical, and it is one that many non-technical investigators make serious mistakes in, and that is the preservation of digital evidence. Digital evidence is extraordinarily fragile. Unlike a physical crime scene where blood or fingerprints may remain for days or weeks, digital evidence can be overwritten, deleted, or altered within seconds. This is why the moment you identify a potential source of evidence, a computer, a smartphone, a server, a router, your absolute first priority is to preserve that evidence exactly as it is, without changing it in any way. In professional digital forensics, we follow a principle called forensic imaging, which means creating an exact bit-for-bit copy of a storage device before we examine it. This ensures that the original evidence remains untouched, while investigators work only on the copy. The tools used for this process include specialized software like FTK Imager, InCase, or the open-source tool called DD in a Linux environment. When an image is created, forensic investigators also generate what is called a hash value, a mathematical fingerprint of the data, usually using the MD5 or SHA-256 algorithm, which proves in court that the copy is identical to the original and has not been tampered with. Let's use a practical example. Imagine you are investigating a case where a company employee is suspected of stealing confidential trade secrets and sending them to a competitor. You must not simply turn on the employee's computer and start looking through files, because doing so changes file access timestamps and could destroy metadata. Instead, you shut down the computer properly, remove the hard drive if possible, connect it to a white blocker, a device that allows you to read data without writing any changes back, and then create a forensic image. This is how you protect the integrity of your evidence and ensure that it will hold up in court. Once the evidence is preserved, the next stage is identifying all the possible sources of digital evidence relevant to your case, and this is where deep technical knowledge becomes essential. In a cybercrime investigation, evidence doesn't live in just one place. It's scattered across many different systems, and a skilled investigator must know where to look. The major sources of digital evidence include the victim's devices, such as computers, smartphones, and tablets, the suspect's devices, if you can legally obtain them, network logs from routers, firewalls, and intrusion detection systems, server logs from websites, email servers, and cloud platforms, internet service provider records, which can tell you which IP addresses were assigned to which user at a specific date and time, social media platforms and messaging applications, financial transaction records from banks and payment processors, and cloud storage services. Let's walk through a detailed example. Suppose you are investigating a phishing attack where victims received emails pretending to be from their bank and they were directed to a fake website where they entered their login credentials. Your evidence collection would involve multiple layers. First, you would analyze the phishing emails themselves, extracting the full email headers, which contain routing information showing the actual path the email traveled across the internet. Second, you would investigate the fake website, looking at its domain registration records through Whois databases, its hosting provider, and its IP address. Third, you would contact the internet service provider to identify which of their subscribers was assigned that IP address at the specific date and time in question. And fourth, you would analyze the malicious website's code to understand what data was collected and where it was being sent. Each of these sources tells you a different part of the story, and it's only when you combine all of them together that you start to build a clear picture of who was behind the attack. One of the most important and well-known techniques in cybercrime investigation is IP address tracing, and I want to explain this clearly so you understand both its power and its limitations. Every device connected to the internet is assigned an IP address, a unique numerical label that identifies it on the network. When a crime is committed online, there is almost always an IP address attached to the activity, and tracing that address is often the first step towards identifying a suspect. The process works like this. You obtain the IP address from a log file, email header, or server record. You perform a Whois lookup or use a geolocation tool to identify the internet service provider that owns that IP block and the approximate geographical location. You then send a legal request or subpoena to that ISP, asking them to identify which of their subscribers was assigned to that IP address at the specific date and time in question. For example, if a hacker used IP address 203.0.113.45 to access a company's server at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, you would contact the ISP that owns that IP block, and they would be able to tell you that address was assigned to a specific home broadband account at that time. However, and this is very important, experienced cybercriminals know how to hide their real IP address using tools like VPNs, proxy servers, the Tor network, or by hacking intermediate computers and routing their traffic through them to obscure their origin. This is why IP tracing is just one piece of the puzzle, and investigators must combine it with other methods to truly identify a suspect. When cybercriminals conduct attacks, they often use malicious software, malware, and analyzing this malware is a core component of many cybercrime investigations. Malware analysis is a specialized skill that involves examining malicious code to understand what it does, how it spreads, what data it steals or destroys, and crucially, what clues it contains about who created it. There are two main approaches to malware analysis. The first is called static analysis, where you examine the code without actually running it, looking at its structure, the commands it contains, any hard-coded IP addresses or domain names it communicates with, and any text strings embedded in the code. The second approach is dynamic analysis, where you run the malware in a safe, isolated environment called a sandbox, a virtual machine completely disconnected from real networks, and observe its behavior in real time. Using dynamic analysis, you can see exactly which files the malware creates or modifies, which network connections it attempts to make, which registry keys it changes on a Windows system, and what data it tries to send out. A fascinating real-world example of malware analysis leading to an attribution is the investigation of the Stuxnet worm, which was discovered in 2010 and had infected systems connected to Iran's nuclear program. Security researchers performed deep static and dynamic analysis of the Stuxnet code and found that it was extraordinarily sophisticated, containing 4 separate zero-day exploits, previously unknown vulnerabilities, and was specifically designed to target a particular type of industrial control system used in centrifuges. The complexity and precision of the code, combined with political intelligence, led investigators to conclude that the malware was created by a nation-state actor, which was later attributed to the United States and Israel. This is the level of insight that deep malware analysis can provide. Now I want to talk about something that technical people sometimes overlook, but which is absolutely essential to a successful cybercrime investigation, and that is the legal framework. No matter how brilliant your technical investigation is, if you collect evidence illegally or fail to maintain a proper chain of custody, all of that evidence can be thrown out of court and your case falls apart. Every step of a cybercrime investigation must be conducted within the boundaries of the law, and this begins with understanding jurisdiction. Cybercrime is unique because it crosses borders. A hacker in one country might attack a victim in another country using servers hosted in a third country, and this creates enormous legal complexity. Investigators must identify which laws apply: the domestic laws of the victim's country, international treaties like the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, and mutual legal assistance treaties that allow law enforcement agencies in different countries to share evidence. Before you access any device, account, or stored data that belongs to a suspect or a third party, you generally need a warrant or a court order, a legal document issued by a judge that authorizes you to collect specific evidence. Chain of custody is the documented record of every person who has handled a piece of evidence, from the moment it was collected to the moment it is presented in court. Every transfer of custody must be logged: who collected the item, when, where, and how it was packaged and stored. If there is any break in that chain, any period where the evidence cannot be accounted for, a defense attorney can argue that the evidence may have been tampered with and the court may exclude it. Maintaining an unbroken chain of custody is not just a best practice, it is a legal requirement that directly determines whether your investigation results in a conviction. After you have collected, preserved, and analyzed all your digital evidence, the next major challenge is attribution, proving beyond a reasonable doubt that a specific person or group was responsible for the cybercrime. Attribution is often the hardest part of a cybercrime investigation because the internet was not designed for accountability in mind, and sophisticated criminals take many steps to remain anonymous. Attribution works by building a convergence of evidence. No single piece of evidence is usually enough, but when multiple independent pieces all point to the same person, the case becomes very strong. Technical attribution comes from IP address records, device identifiers called MAC addresses, unique malware code signatures, email account registrations, domain registrations, and digital transaction records. Behavioral attribution involves analyzing the tactics, techniques, and procedures, what we call TTPs, that a criminal uses, which often remain consistent across different attacks and can be matched to known threat actors. Open source intelligence, commonly abbreviated as OSINT, is also hugely valuable. This involves using publicly available information from social media profiles, forum posts, public databases, and online communities to build a profile of a suspect. For example, in the investigation of the Silk Road, the dark web marketplace for illegal goods, the FBI were able to identify the operator, Ross Ulbricht, not just through technical investigation of the Tor hidden services infrastructure, but also by finding a post on a public forum where the username Altoid had advertised the Silk Road in its earliest days, and that same username was linked to a Gmail account registered to Ross Ulbricht's real name. One small open-source discovery connected an anonymous criminal to a real-world identity, and that was the beginning of the end for the operation. Cybercrime is a global problem, and no single law enforcement agency can tackle it alone. Major cybercrime investigations almost always involve cooperation between multiple agencies across multiple countries, and understanding how to navigate this ecosystem is a critical skill for any cybercrime investigator. In the United States, the primary agencies involved in cybercrime investigation are the FBI's Cyber Division, the Secret Service's Cyber Intelligence Section, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, known as CISA, and the Department of Justice's Computer Crime and Intellectual Property Section. Internationally, Interpol runs dedicated cybercrime operations, and Europol's European Cybercrime Center coordinates investigations across European Union member states. When a case crosses borders, investigators use formal channels like mutual legal assistance treaties to request evidence from foreign jurisdictions, and they may also use Interpol's secure communications network called I-24/7 to share intelligence with partner agencies in other countries. For smaller-scale investigations or cases that may not rise to the level of federal attention, cybercrime investigators work closely with industry partners, internet service providers, technology companies, social media platforms, and financial institutions who have their own security and fraud investigation teams and who can provide critical evidence through legal requests. The final stage of any investigation is preparing a comprehensive investigative report that documents every step taken, every piece of evidence collected, the legal authorities under which it was obtained, the analytical conclusions drawn, and the identity of the suspect or suspects. This report is the foundation of the prosecution's case, and it must be precise, well-organized, and able to withstand scrutiny from defense attorneys and judges who may not have a technical background. And that, my friends, is a complete walkthrough of how to investigate a cybercrime case, from the moment a complaint is received all the way through to building a prosecution-ready case. Let me quickly summarize the 9 core stages we covered today. First, understanding and classifying the cybercrime. Second, receiving and thoroughly documenting the complaint. Third, preserving all digital evidence immediately and correctly. Fourth, identifying every possible source of digital evidence. Fifth, tracing IP addresses and digital footprints. Sixth, analyzing malware and the tools used in the attack. Seventh, following all legal requirements, including obtaining warrants and maintaining chain of custody. Eighth, building your attribution case through converging technical and behavioral evidence. And ninth, coordinating with domestic and international agencies and preparing your final investigative report. Cybercrime investigation is one of the most demanding disciplines in law enforcement and security because it requires you to be both a skilled detective and a technically proficient analyst at the same time, and the landscape is constantly changing as criminals develop new tools and techniques. But every single investigation, no matter how complex, follows these same fundamental principles. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, share it with someone who is studying in this field, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new video. I will be doing deep dives into specific topics like forensic imaging, OSINT techniques, dark web investigation, and cryptocurrency tracing in upcoming videos, so stay tuned. Until next time, stay curious, stay ethical, and stay safe.